All right, let's get moving. You're ready to get going because I don't want to go too long. I want you to make sure you have enough time. I would like to introduce you to Audra Gaiziunas, who is the owner of Brewed for Her Ledger LLC, a management consultancy firm focused on providing guidance to the craft alcohol community. She is also Chief Financial Officer for Citizen Vinyl, which I just learned about because beer and music do go together perfectly. The small business financial specialist at her local CDFI Mountain BizWorks and an owner of Dissolver in Asheville. Prior to launching her own company in 2013, she served as Dogfish Head Craft Brewery's controller and Mother Earth Brewing's chief financial officer. She was appointed to the treasurer role of the Brewers Association Board of Directors as an at-large member in 2024, while having served on the financial committee since January of 2020. A graduate from a Keenan Flagler 1 MBA program at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Audra possesses over 2 decades of experience in senior leadership roles in craft brewing, manufacturing, services, nonprofits, and startups. She earned her undergraduate degree in accounting and business management from Loras College in Dubuque, Iowa in 1997. And on a personal note, this is her 7th out of 9 conferences that she comes to every year. She might be one of the smartest financial people that I know. It's very intimidating. So thank you for being here and doing this presentation. Audra.
All right, guys, good to be back. I was hoping to have a few more people that want to talk about AI, especially as it touches finance, but I still feel like I'm on the leading edge for it, especially when it comes to numbers and the sensitivity that we have around numbers and how we need to treat it with so much care. And so I'm providing my number here. If you text me your email, I will send you a link to this Gamma. I use Gamma for all of my presentations now, which is a wonderful AI tool that just play around with it and see. But I, as a fractional CFO, let's start with this journey of what it has been looking like. About a year ago, my boyfriend, longtime boyfriend, and I were in the city, in New York City, celebrating a friend's 40th birthday, and we were at a bar in Brooklyn, and we're sitting and having beers, and he just got really quiet around me. And I was trying to figure out what's going on. A few more beers it took to get out of him. And he's like, Audra, I'm going to change the direction of my company. I'm about to shift how I create websites and what I do with my company. He creates websites in WordPress. He has been a WordPress designer since he was 22, and he fell off a waterfall, 60-foot waterfall, and started his web company out of a hospital bed, with going through a lot of surgeries in reconstruction. And he's been a WordPress guy ever since 2007. And he's like, I think this AI thing, it's going to change how I'm going to be doing business. It's going to change how my company is going to look, who I'm going to work with, and I have all these itches that I want to scratch. It's a crazy world out there, and I think this is where I'm going to move my company. And I think you should start considering incorporating tools, AI tools, into your daily life, into your work, and just be ready. So that was a year ago. And so, as most of us do, we start playing around with ChatGPT, the free version, Claude, the free version, start asking it questions. For me, it was more about scheduling meetings, organizing. I use Audra, for all the meetings that I had to organize things. I started to ask the agents, and I was using a combination, and that's what I think is best, is when you get started on this journey. I would use ChatGPT, I would use Claude, and I would use Gemini. I didn't really use Copilot, but those 3, and I would ask it the same question, and I would get different answers at times. And the more that you use each one of those agents, the more it customizes to you, to your likes, to what your area of focus is, your area of business, it starts to be customized based on your questions and data sets. I wasn't feeding it data yet. I wasn't trusting it. But I wanted to get to know each one of these agents a little bit more and see which one am I going to vibe with the best. And me being as a CFO, like, which one can I trust to give me the best information, knowing that I have to be very specific and mindful with my prompts. And it ended up being Claude, which is what I end up using. And I've paid version, so I spend the $200 a year for the pro version. I have, and I'll tell you a couple other ones, but I dove in and I just started to create tools. Now, with the sensitivity that we have with financials and financial data, I'm using these tools to build workflows, to build workbooks, to create sensitivity analysis as the container. I'm not feeding it the data itself until I have the tool that's exported out. So I'm not taking somebody's financials and I'm putting it into the agent. It was a very different process. Like, most people just start to play with it. They feed it information, the information that they have. They ask Claude or they ask ChatGPT, perform this analysis, or what do you think I should be doing next? My approach, because I'm a fractional CFO and I work with so many different breweries from coast to coast, I want to create a container and a toolbox that I'm going to have that I can offer then to breweries, to my brewery clients, to themselves, or as a way to amplify myself, like amplify my skill set and what I have. So it's a different approach. I'm not using the agent to give me the answer. I'm using the agent to create a toolkit for myself that I could then put information into later, and that would keep everybody's information safe. Meanwhile, my boyfriend shifted over and started to build an operating system. He started to use Claude every week. Over the last year, it's been something different. He's like, oh, check out Napkin. Look what I can do with Napkin. Here's this visualization. And I pop into his office, and now he's working on Replit, and building apps off of Replit that are looking at weather systems and how they are impacting the river flow within any river in the United States. What are the river conditions right now in any river in the United States, so that you could send that information to an outfitter? It was like whatever interest he had, he was just pulling all these different AI tools together, trying to figure out what the direction is going to be. And ultimately, through a combination of Replit, Napkin, NAN, which is a big one, which we're going to talk about today too. It creates workflows for you, and there's a free version that it automates a lot of your behind the scenes type of work. He met with the founder in like a little mastermind group, my boyfriend did, and asked to ask him some questions. And he was like, this NAN thing is real, and I really like it, and I feel like I can create some templates that I can then upload in. It's an open source. And so when you're working with WordPress, when you're working with like Linux, and I'm not a tech person, that's the other thing. Like, I'm really good with financial acronyms. I got finance and accounting down. This is a brand new world to me, a brand new world of acronyms that I've been learning. But you don't need to be tech to do a lot of this work anymore. And what he did through a combination of N8N, Replit, and Claude is he built his own closed loop operating system, complete with apps, over the last year. So then he exported all out of Claude and put it on a standalone computer. So he created a closed loop system that you would, if you had any type of information that you would feed into it, it wouldn't go back out to any agent, but he had the workflows that he built behind it already set. And so that was my inspiration. His operating system is Lorraine.ai, named after his very first executive assistant that he had for his website company back in the day. And he called her, and she's like a 70-something-year-old lady now, told her, I named my AI company after you. You're an inspiration, Lorraine. You always were the glue that helped keep the company together. And so now I've created this AI operating system that is an homage to you. So I thought it was really touching, and she was just, and I'm looking at all this from afar, going, wow, he's building a lot, but does it really apply to what I'm doing? And as time has gone on, I found that it has. And I started to test so I do a lot of valuation calculations. So I started to test my assumptions and the way that I did my math. So I would perform the valuation, redact any sort of identifying information in the valuation, anything in the data set. Always redacting it, always removing it. There is nobody's, any PII is what we call it in the AI space, is personal identifying information, identifiable information. So anything that redacted. And then I fed that information into a workbook that I created using Claude, and it came up with almost the same numbers. And it gave me a really nice explanation. And so to me, I started to do this in a testing way. I'm doing the work, but then I'm having the agent test it and take a look at it. Like, and if there are differences, why are those differences there? The other thing that was fun to do is to give Claude and to give ChatGPT the exact same task, and then ask and tell the agent, why are you the better agent versus Claude? Why are you the better agent, and what makes you different from ChatGPT in the response you're giving to me? Why are you the better agent for this task? This is kind of fun. You pit them against each other and see what they come up with. But I started to really play around more heavily with it to understand, okay, how can I use it in my everyday life as a CFO when I'm already in Excel pretty heavily? And I love this space. I love data mining. I love creating reports. Paul knows, most of my talks are pretty tech heavy. And, but I wanted to have something that, what if is there a way to become superhuman from the finance side of it through the use of AI? And then Matt Schumer's post that he posted, then directly, there's a link on it here. Something big is happening. I don't know how many of you have read this. When it came out and I read it, it just was like, oh no, this is definitely go time and go full force all the way. The link to my Gamma too, all the hyperlinks work, so you'll be able to link onto it and read through everything. But that to me was like, this is time to definitely go all guns forward. Let's see what we can do. So it all started about a year ago in New York City. And here we are a year later, and I'm doing all sorts of stuff that I never thought was possible. The thing is that the mindset that we have to take on this, because it is equally terrifying as it is exciting. I think it's like, I never knew that I could do things like what I'm doing now, but I'm also super terrified about what it lies ahead because of the pace of change that we're experiencing right now. So are we playing a game of musical chairs with fewer chairs to begin with? Or are we creating superhuman or enhanced versions of ourselves? And in the mindset that you choose to take is up to you. And so I've gone the positive route, and I'm leaning into that. I have to. Those of you also that have come to my talks in the past know that I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. I've shown up in Star Wars cosplay at our talks here and in other conferences, and so you'll see my little homage to Star Wars and beer throughout the rest of my presentation. So to give you a little bit of a background on where we're at as an industry and how this all comes to play, is that we're all at razor thin margins. If you're looking at the BA stats, an average net profit margin of 5%, we have to realize every dollar of efficiency that we can. And then at the same time, we're spending a lot of time on manual processes. Even those of us who are using software to automate a lot of our production side, we still have, most of us are small, and we have multiple small data repositories. We have 3 data repositories. We're going to have our financial, our point of sale, and then our inventory management. And they don't really talk to each other. We kind of depend on some workarounds on the software folks to be able to give us the appropriate answers when we're asking them through the support mechanisms that they offer, or we're offloading it and we're just spending a lot of time spinning our wheels. So with the 8 workflows that I'm going to introduce today, what that does is it brings your month-end close process down by up to 80%. So if you're spending 12 to 16 months on a month-end close, it drops to about 3 to 4 hours because you're automating a lot of the processes behind the scenes. And I'm going to take you through those 8 workflows. Also, stat from last year, when as part of one of our surveys that we did through the BA, 2/3 of our breweries, they report cash flow visibility as their number one operational challenge. So how do we gain a greater control over cash flow as well as the visibility of what is happening within our business without having to rely constantly on an outside source, whether it's an outside accountant or a CFO or somebody that we hope is looking out for her best interests? Is that enough? And for most of us, it's not. And then our average monthly bookkeeping costs, I have a limited data set on this because this is still, again, like leading edge and still really in its infancy for our industry. So my monthly average bookkeeping costs for 8,500 to 15,000 barrels of what I've seen and what I've worked with, that's really what 4,200 is about what they're paying for manual accounting processes that AI can cut by about 80% as well. So I took that stat and I looked at all of the data sets of the breweries that I work with, and I could come up with that cost really aligns with about the 8,500 to 15,000 barrel metric. So it drops a little bit as you get smaller, but there's so much that we can glean and learn through the adoption of a lot of these workflows, but the errors are the biggest area for us that we have to work with and work through. TTB errors that we make, just manual bookkeeping errors, misclassifications, and then not taking advantage of discount periods for payments on time or early because we're trying to conserve as much cash flow as possible. So SCORE, small business through the Small Business Network that you can see, they usually offer a lot of financial templates too if you want to work with. They also said that the annual error cost for small breweries of under 30 staff, they lose an average of about $15,000 a year to those manual bookkeeping errors. So missed postings, duplicate payments, and missed reconciliations. We all make mistakes, but now we can finally look at how that's been monetized. And that's what it's costing us. So 1,200 hours of spreadsheets per year for about a 30-person brewery. That's a lot. And depending on the rate, again, this stat comes from WASP Barcode Technologies. It's an equivalent of about $96,000 in labor costs, $1.2 million in missed discounts industry-wide. So Sierra Nevada, with larger breweries, have been running AI processes on their breweries for a period of time now, for at least 3 years. And they did a case study to look at how much they had in missed discounts and early payment, discounts that they had missed out based on slow AP processing. And that's their number that they came up with. That's huge, huge, huge. So yeah, we can't realize that, but small breweries, we can definitely realize at least a few $1,000s a year. And then AI test pilots through Anthropic, which is Claude, the pilot test caught about 98% of data entry errors before they hit the general ledger. So through these workflows that we're going to be working through and looking at. Then cash flow forecasts, 3 times faster. I know that when I do forecasting for a lot of the breweries between October and December of every year, annual budget process, I usually spend between 4 and 8 hours, depending on the complexity of the brewery and incorporating all the capital budgeting and all that in there. By using the tools that I've created through Claude, I can create a forecast in 6 minutes. 6 minutes versus 4 to 8 hours. And I run through it and look at it and yeah, you did a better job than I could in a much faster time, but you still want to make sure that you're validating the numbers that are going in there and to match up with what the brewery is actually trying to accomplish. But started to build those types of tool sets in my kit that I can offer so that I can spend more time doing value-added work with the breweries that I am working with. Let's talk through strategy a little bit more. Let's talk about things that really require personal touch, because all this machine learning is fantastic for helping speed things up and have us be more efficient, but it does not substitute lived experience. It will never be a substitute for lived experience. And being able to share and collaborate with humans and other people on something, that will not go away. But you can automate a lot of those mundane tasks, like Julie just talked in the last session, and Patty, who I just saw a little earlier, will talk about in her next session. And also through automating a lot of our mundane tasks, fewer audit mistakes, or mistakes that would flag an audit come up as a result of that. So BA statistic here that fewer compliance issues and faster TTB reporting turnarounds comes out of that. So yeah, 50 to 75% monthly close process, we can speed up the processing and what we do. 90% error reduction. And Claude Cowork, it compressed a full week of financial tasks into a 15-minute, agentic run in January of this year, from 7 days to 15 minutes. It's huge. We have to take baby steps to get there. It's not going to be all overnight. It just shows, like, there's a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes that we may not be fully realizing yet from our side, because we're so small. We're craft manufacturers that don't like a lot of automation. Some of us still use paper logs, but it's coming. I mean, the QuickBooks has its own agent that they're going to have to connect to bank feeds that all goes live and becomes standard in May already this year. Like, this is happening super fast. So I don't have all the answers, but I'm along for the ride as much as I can be. And it's really like, so here's some guides of tools that some brewery owners and other manufacturing CFOs have been using to turn their spreadsheets into smart sheets. Data Rails to me is one of my favorite ones. It's more of a legacy AI, if you want to even call it that, with how short-lived every cycle is. But Data Rails is like a financial planning and analysis platform that embeds AI directly into your Excel workbooks, and it can give you a lot of forecasting and reporting capability with some simple nudges. I love Data Rails. But then there's others that partner together. I see Jason from Strong Rope here, and he's a big advocate for Airtables, and Airtables are one that we can definitely be using, and I use it to automate a lot of my processes too, behind the scenes. Airtables, so I work with our local CDFI Mountain BizWorks. It's a nonprofit. We provide lending and capital to business owners that can traditionally not find it at banks. And we use Airtable for a lot of our data that we have at this nonprofit so that we can automate it too. So Airtable I love also for batch costing. You can create batches in there. You can ask it a bunch of questions. I know, like Jason's like, yep, absolutely. But it's great for inventory tracking, batch costing, vendor management. Like, you can do so much with that I just see the future of any software can potentially like become very non-existent. Like, there's so much potential to disrupt any software provider right now that has their a contract with us because of the tools that are out there to be able to disrupt it. All we gotta take a little bit of time. Causal is also a really good one that I've been starting to play with a little bit more. So Claude, I spend $200 a year for the pro version, and I also pair it up with N8N, which is a workflow. It gives you it's an open source workflow template area, like repository, that you can clone any workflow you want off of that. And then Zapier, also use that for a lot of like the handshake type of work, but no code. I'm a finance person. I am not a tech person. I don't code things, but I know what I want things to do. And I know the work, like, I've gone through so many years, almost 30 years of software implementations. I know the logic. I can't do the coding, but I know the logic behind it. And that's all really what you need to do, is spend some time and defining what those workflows and what that logic looks like. And all this can be done through like JSON and Python and all these coding languages that I've never touched before in my life, but I'm watching this magic happen before my eyes, and I'm like, that really just happened? So here's my AI finance tech stack. This is what I'm using today. So I'm using Claude, I'm using Zapier, N8N, open source workflow automation, QuickBooks Online for most of the breweries that I work with, Plaid as the connector through bank data. There's other ones that you can use as well, but Plaid is one that a lot of people know. Google Sheets themselves, depending on who the client is. Sometimes you don't have an Ecos or a Beer 30 or Ollie, and Google Sheets are what you, or Airtable is what you're dependent upon. Well, that's perfectly fine. If I were Ecos, Beer 30 or Ollie, I might be a little bit worried right now. Just saying. But if you can do batch costing in Google Sheets and pair it up with all these other platforms, you can build a really powerful set and toolkit, BI, and like business intelligence analysis type of workbook. And so this is what I use. GitHub also I use GitHub to pull tax rates for excise taxes and sales tax by state. And I have it bump up against the repository, so the TTV and then the State Department of Revenue regularly, so that those stay up to date, because those will get out of date quickly otherwise. We want to make sure that that's pulling in correctly. And then Slack for conversations, as well as risk alerts and audit summaries. So I do a lot of auditing. I use Slack for that, but that's just workflow 8. Okay, so let's go through the workflows. I am not going to go through all the specific semantics because that's way too advanced and boring. But those of you that are really interested in that and have that function within your respective breweries, this is specifically how to do the workflow. And I would start with workflow 1. This is your introduction to using AI in the finance function within your brewery. Start with automated invoice capture and entry. This is the easiest one. It's going to be immediately beneficial to you, and it gets you used to working with Claude. So the prompt exactly is extract every line by line, every line item from the attached invoice PDF, return a JSON array with fields, vendor, date, description, quantity, unit price. So like here's the exact prompt to use for that. You can train Claude on a few sample invoices. So what that does is that the vendor is going to email the PDF of their invoice to a dedicated inbox. So whatever, it could be like invoices@yourbrewery.com. The vendor emails that. Zapier monitors that inbox, recognizes, oh, there's a PDF coming from a vendor, and it forwards that to Claude. So Zapier takes that, monitors it, forwards it to Claude. Claude then uses its character recognition software. It reads the information that's on the PDF, extracts it to JSON, N8N then writes a structured JSON into QuickBooks via the API. And there you go. You can do that. This to me is the one that you should walk away from and experiment with. Start with this one. Train it on 20 sample invoices from your top vendors just to calibrate the accuracy, and it will start to get to know what the vendors are and their payment terms. Like, it's crazy what it can start to recognize with patterns over time. But make sure that you don't have, your scans are not low resolution, because Claude's optimal character recognition, that OCRC, I hate acronyms because I use them in accounting all the time, and now I have to have them in AI as well. But it can't read, then the accuracy drops if the letters are fuzzy, the numbers are fuzzy. So anything below 80%. But this to me is the workflow that you'll find immediate benefit from, because it's all automated. And if you just have this is all within the $200 a year Claude. That's the only thing I'm spending money on right now. You can spend money on other things, but I'm thinking about us as breweries that are on a budget. How can we operate and optimize the greatest amount of benefit from the AI tools that are available to us, whether the free or paid version? Claude is the only thing that I pay for. I do for ChatGPT, but that's to test Claude more than anything and constantly test. So Claude is the big one that I'm spending money on. Workflow 2. That's right, Chewy loves his money. Real-time cash flow forecasting. So you can, through using Plaid, and this is a little bit, I purposely have this coming off the presentation slide a bit because I wanted to have the syntax and the instructions for you exactly here so that you don't have to mess around, especially with sensitive information. Finance I was so nervous about doing anything that I would present to the public. I didn't want to do a live demo, didn't think that was right. So I'm giving you all these specific prompts to use within your own data sets. What we should do, always have CSV. CSV is my love language. I use CSV for everything to export, import, that's the format, and always redact all personal identifying information. Anything that would have your brewery name on it, account names, numbers, equity, names on equity line items, all that. I always redact that. Anyway, in your Google Sheet, you have a Google Sheet, you're gonna have a seasonality tag that you can add, like little dips and flows. But what you're doing here, using your bank statements and every day through Plaid, you have it talk through Claude. The prompt is, given the last 90 days of cash in and cash out rows, forecast the daily ending cash balance for the next 30 days and highlight any day where the balance is under 5,000 or whatever your par level or low level is for cash. And it can send you an automatic email on that. And it starts to create a cash flow forecast for you rather than you having to look through an Excel every single day to try to manage this process. So there are the steps. Connect to Plaid into a Google Sheet. Claude's going to take a 90-day history of inflows, outflows. It looks at your bank information, flags any day balance below 5,000, and then via Zapier, I have the forecast sent to me every single morning as the CFO or the brewery owner. So there's just some data prep tips in there as well, but you can use this for daily real-time cash flow forecasting. Pretty freaking cool. So does Chewbacca think the same way? Yes, he does. Expense categorization. This is another one that's a pretty good one to have. It's better than, remember when you would set up rules in QuickBooks and it would start to figure out, the vendor is attached to this expense line item? It's like so 1.0. You can use Claude with a combination with Concur or whatever you use for expense tracking. So it could be Expensify, it could be Google Sheets. I'm just, whatever you use. Concur is one that's commonly used in our industry. That there's a webhook that fires into Claude that upon the receipt upload, it sends the image and it'll look at your bump up against your chart of accounts and it'll classify that automatically. So the prompt itself, classify this receipt image into one of the company expense categories. You'll have the expense categories in the chart of accounts in CSV. If the amount exceeds 500 for marketing or whatever that amount could be, return it as a flag so that you could come back and check to make sure, okay, this was an approved expense or it's over a certain dollar amount. It requires a human touch and approval or massaging into it, and then return that JSON with category and flag status. So this, to me, really is the enhanced version of QuickBooks starting to recognize what your expenses are based on your supplier by just automating it totally. You can also use it for vendor payment scheduling and early discount captures. Every invoice that comes in, compute the latest date qualifying for early payment discount, prioritized by highest discount percent per dollars with dollar amounts. that's the technical side of it. I'm not going to talk about the ACH payments and all that. Like, all that happens behind the scenes. I wanted to make sure I provided that context, but you can get, this is another benefit that you have for automating a lot of your process and workflow behind the scenes, is that you can take advantage of a lot of those early discounts and not miss out on them because of slow payment cycling, or you're behind in inputting information. Some of these really work really well together, but the first one that I talked about, that's the one that you really should start with. But this is another one that's really helpful, and where some of the statistics of where the savings comes from and the monetary benefit comes from that first stat slide I showed you. It comes from this workflow itself. Brew batch cost allocation. Overhead cost allocation, and creating a margin dashboard. So we all have overhead costs. Last year, I gave a talk on cost of goods sold, how to go about performing an overhead allocation, flipping if you were here last year, I took the income statement and I flipped it in such a way that we were looking it through the lens of direct and indirect and fixed and variable costs. So you came up with an overhead pool. Here's your overhead. And so what you can do is you can take $12,000 of, like, let's say, costs that were not directly tied to any sort of batch that are sort of out there, whether it's through variances, pricing, shipping, and we don't have an Ollie or a Beer 30 that allocates the fuel surcharges or other expenses. So you have a total amount of expense bucket. You can just figure out how to allocate it. And this one would be allocate the $12,000 raw material cost across the 3 batches listed based on weight of hops used per batch. Return the batch ID and the cost per batch. Like, boop, there you go. All the overhead allocated to the actual batches themselves. There's a lot of potential for this. This is just one small workflow for it, but you can allocate overhead automatically now through the use of Claude. Claude is my friend. This is the one that I would say would be the most sensitive with. Maybe you should not do this one immediately and initially, but you can use it for regulatory and tax reporting automation. You just have to trust the source that it's bumping up against, which is the CSV that I maintain in GitHub of all the excise tax rates by state. The Fed, we know. But if this Bruce to Barnes thing passes, it's going to be really helpful too for us. But here it'll help. You'll look at every transaction, determine, this would use your information that you have from your point of sale. So Toast, Square, whatever you're using for your point of sale. Export all those transactions, and then you overlay it with the Claude prompt of determine the applicable federal excise tax per barrel and state sales excise tax. It'll group everything together and output a CSV with columns so that you can then report and pay on that amount. Like, it'll automate the calculation of your excise tax for you. This one I would wait on until you're fully confident in the other workflows, but it's an example of where that I find some savings of time for myself in having to not have to do a pivot table and rather have this automatically generated. You can create a key performance indicator dashboard. It's pretty fun. I think I see my Hello Kitty. Is there a KPI for that? It's down here. I'm all about key performance indicators and building dashboards and dynamic dashboards. So you can use, there's a workflow for it too. This, you would be using your financial statements in QuickBooks and say, summarize the month. Now, what I do, again, I'm going to look at QuickBooks. I export my information out of QuickBooks into a CSV. I remove the brewery name. I remove any identifying information that is off there. Any balance account numbers, all of that. Like, if there's an account number in there, I just put cash. Like, I will overwrite it and redact it. Be very careful on any sort of personally identifying information that you could be disclosing. But I will do that, I'll export it, and then I'll do it for a 2-year period on a monthly basis. So the P&L month by month from QuickBooks, redact all identifying information and say, summarize month-to-month change in EBITDA, in one sentence, noting the primary driver, and use a professional, concise tone. And it'll create it for you. It'll give you a dashboard. And I also have a financial health diagnostic tool that I created from Claude. I didn't put it here, but when you text me your brewery email to get this presentation, I will send you my financial health diagnostic tool, and it was 100% built in Claude. And it bumps up against the NAICS codes that we have, the tax tables NAICS codes, and it brings back benchmarks from that register that we then compare against ourselves with. So I think it's pretty fun. And then finally, audit trail summarization. This one is also a little bit on the lower end of the scale for importance, but you want to be able to identify any sort of problematic entries that could be occurring early. So identify journal entries over $10,000 posted outside business hours. Summarize each with date, user, amount, and a risk rating. So what this is doing is we're trying to ensure that transactions are not happening without our knowledge. It helps us minimize the potential for fraud and dishonest employees, potentially. But this I like. This I usually put in at the lowest kind of level of importance. Everything else this is kind of like icing on the cake for you to be able to flag any sort of inconsistencies or errors. So some universal best practices across all workflows, regardless of how many you use. Always use explicit JSON schemas in your prompts. I give you the exact prompt to use, so that will be knowing is half the battle, right? So use that. Test that with test with 5 sample records before going live. And data quality, always clean your CSVs before feeding Claude. Again, not just trimming the white space and standardizing date formats, but reducing or removing all identifying information, anything personally identifying. And then what I also do is I set a review window for myself as a CFO to look at any sort of outputs that have been flagged by any of these workflows in Claude. So you always need to have a human in this cycle. We're just used for other things. We're focused not on the mundane day-to-day tasks. We're looking at the things that are getting our attention, that are like, oh, hold on, this dollar amount is too high for this, or this seems off. So it brings our attention to the areas that we're needed most, so that we're not spending time doing mundane, like routine things that machines can do for us. Don't replace every manual check. That's a pitfall to dodge. People think like, I'm going to set it and forget it and I'm good to go. There should always still be a human involved. And I say as a best practice to retain a quarterly manual audit. That AI confidence should be earned and not assumed. In the beginning, like I do it right now, I'm doing a weekly manual audit just to be safe and just to be sure. And then eventually I'll go to monthly. And then quarterly, and quarterly are those breweries that have been using it for a period of years now. So most of us are small, and a weekly audit is good enough. Never send any raw customer information to Claude, PII, personally identifying information, redacting names, social security numbers, card numbers, and all of that. We want to make sure that there's no privacy leak. And look at token usage. Well, most of us are not going to have to worry about token usage. We're going to be using Claude to the degree that it doesn't go over that $200 a year level that we'd be using the pro version for. So $200 a year or $17 a month. And then refresh your prompts quarterly to prevent model drift. So Julie talked about hallucination. Hallucination happens with every AI agent, especially if the prompts aren't specific. Claude can also hallucinate on outdated tax tables or sale vendor terms if that context isn't updated, so come back and review those prompts regularly. I have a 4-week pilot to scale timeline that I've included. We're running a little short on time because we started a little late, but that's okay. What I would say with this is just really focus on that first workflow for invoice entry and automation. I think that one, like I said, it's the low-hanging fruit, but you realize the benefit of that right away, and it may just inspire you to continue on through the next workflow journeys that I'm offering here. But most of the breweries that I've worked with, it's about a 4-week rollout for the entire cycle. So for here, foundation, look at what your data sources are, define where that information is coming from, map those point of sale connections, any other, your inventory management software, build your sandbox N8N automation flow. So go into Claude go into N8N and clone the workflows that are in N8N. And the ones that fit these, there's so many of them. It's pretty awesome. And then build your first workflow over the first week. Test that invoice capture prompt with 20 sample invoices. Validate the output against QuickBooks, the JSON output. And then you can go into the next one if you want. The cash flow forecasting would be the next one that I would recommend after the invoice capture. And then once you see how much time you've spent or saved where you were spending before, week 4 may be, hey, let's pull all of these in. I feel confident enough. Or maybe you want to take some time, step back and be like, that's enough, we're good. 2 workflows is enough. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing. And even one workflow is just going to save you a whole heck of a lot of time. Is it worth $200 a year? To me it is, yeah. So, bottom line, this was just a visualization of how much time, when we save time that we're using by enhancing our version of ourselves through these tools, we can spend it doing other things, brewing more beer, spending more time with our people and our customers. There's a lot of money to be saved. For $200 a year, that's all I'm spending. And you saw my AI tech stack, I spend $200 a year. A couple of real world examples. A brewery in the UK, they have deployed the Claude's invoice capture workflow. Now they are a regionally sized brewery. Their invoice processing time dropped by 80%, and they saved 120,000 pounds in 2024. And they spent less than 150 pounds for their AI to do that. And the brewery in California, they are a larger one. I didn't want to name them. They are not Sierra Nevada. They implemented the 30-day cash flow forecast workflow ahead of their slow summer season, and it flagged a critical cash gap for them, and the team avoided a $250,000 overdraft. $178 is all it cost them for that workflow implementation. Both of those projects were launched within a 4-week pilot window, and it never exceeded $180 in annual AI spend. Proof that the $200 budget is realistic. So, your AI superpowered glow up. Sign up for Claude, get the paid version, start to test your first prompt, play, go into N8N, nan.io. They open source workflow templates. They're pre-configured for all 8 brewery finance automations already. You'll find them in N8N, and then run the fast track pilot, starting with the invoice capture, and see where it goes from here. The force is strong. With this return on investment, less than $200 a year to automate your books, may the margins be ever in your favor. And thanks for sitting in with that finance AI talk with me. I hope you learned a lot. So I'll bring my number back up here. So if you want this gamma, please text me your number with your brewery email. I did not automate that on my gamma. And then I will also send you my financial health diagnostic tool so that you can see the capabilities of Claude. And the fact that I built it entirely in Claude is just like, it's mind-blowing. I feel superhuman now. All right, cool. Look, we're in time. 3:04.